That is just such a weird video every single time I see it. Seriously, hey, welcome. Glad you're here. Crossroads this weekend. I have a question to start our time together today, and it's this. What does it take for you to believe in someone or something? What does it take? What does it take for you to believe in someone or something? Now, I know we all just lost an hour of sleep last night, so I'm going to say it one more time. What does it take for you to believe in someone or something? Because I'm going to tell you a story about something that happened to me, and we'll see if you believe me or not. See, this past October, something extraordinary happened to me. I got to go to a really neat party here in the Twin Cities, and it was great. There was great food. Everyone had a phenomenal time, but the guest list was extraordinary. Are you ready to hear who was there? Let me tell you the first person that was there. The first person I ran into was George Bush. Kid you not, former President George Bush in the flesh. But it didn't stop there. All of a sudden, who walks through the door? Minnesota Twin star Joe Mauer. Joe Mauer, there I am, rubbing shoulders with a former president and a former MLB star. It's me, hanging out. But then it didn't stop there. Last but not least, comes through the door, NBA All-Star Karl Anthony Towns. There I am, me, just this guy, hanging out with a former president, a former MLB All-Star Joe Mauer, and Big Cat. I couldn't believe it. So let me ask you, do you believe me? Do you believe that what I just said actually happened? That would be my situation and my scenario. Do you believe that I, Erik Peter Anderson, would be invited to be a part of that kind of party? Do you believe me? Now, before you answer, let me ask this question. Would it help you believe me if I told you that my daughter Noe was at that party with me as well? Would that help? Was this girl right here, if she would come up here on the stage right now to verify the entire thing, would you believe me? By show of hands, would you believe me? Put them up across all of our campuses. Okay, there's some. I see the suspicion. I see the skepticism. Now let me ask, what if I told you there was one more character and person that came to that party? And I wonder if I showed you that person. Actually, I will show you. What if I told you that this person came to the party? Would you believe me? Well, now that I told you that Prince was there, and we all know that Prince passed away in April of 2016, let me just ask, by show of hands, how many of you believe the party really existed and that Noe and I were there? Let me see all your hands across all the campuses. Yeah, just like I thought. Nobody, I get it. But let me add one more layer to this story. What if I told you it was actually a Halloween costume party, and that's where Noe and I went dressed up with all of those characters, right? Which is what happened. Isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting? Because belief is a funny thing. And it makes you wonder why and when we believe in people and events and stories. I just want to say to you and suggest to you, I think people fall into different categories of belief. And they'll be represented by these buckets here on stage today. And I think generally people will fall into one of these belief categories. We'll call these buckets of belief for our time together today. And the first one is this. It's the naive believer. It's someone that just believes. They just believe. Someone says it, they believe it. The internet says it, they believe it. A politician says it, I'm going to stop there. Anyway, they are, I just believe it. They're people that just believe, brother, and just believe, sister. That's how they function. They don't need proof. They don't need evidence. They might be a little gullible, but they just believe. But then there's the next one, and I think this is where I find myself. It's the unsure believer, this person. This person is a person that says, you know what? I'll believe it when I see it. Show me the proof, and I'll believe. Show me the evidence. Show me the cold, hard facts. Then maybe I'll believe. If I need to see it before I believe it. And as I was telling my story, you were even thinking, hey, Erik, show me the selfie you took with Joe Mauer, then I'll believe. Hey, show me the autograph you got from George Bush. Show me the text thread that Carl Anthony Towns sent you saying now that you guys are best friends forever, right? Show me that, and then I'll believe. Hey, bring your daughter out here on stage to verify all of this, and then I'll believe. You're a proof first, then I believe kind of person. But then there's this last one. This person, the never believe. And this person doesn't believe in anything. These are your stone cold cynics. They are people that distrust and disbelieve everyone. It doesn't matter the amount of evidence, the amount of proof that anything extraordinary could occur. They're just not going to believe it. And they're not going to buy it. And for this person, they don't believe in miracles. They don't believe in the supernatural. None of that stuff could exist. There's no room for that in their belief bucket. And so I don't know where you fall in this belief spectrum. I don't know if you're someone that believes everything or if you're someone that doesn't believe anything. I don't know what that is for you, but I think when it comes to believing, sometimes there's a worry and fear that we have. Some of us worry that if we believe in someone or something, that it actually might turn out not to be true. And we worry. Or others of us, when it comes to believing, we're worried that if we don't believe that we might be missing out on something extraordinary, something supernatural. And the reason I'm bringing all of this up today is because we're in a teaching series called When Pigs Fly. And in this series, it's all about believing. And we're asking the question is, can we believe without proof? And what does it take for us to believe in someone and something? And today we're actually going to look at a little more specific question when it comes to belief, one that we're going to see in a story, and one that you might be asking yourself this weekend at one of our campuses. And it's this. What happens when I need a miracle, but I don't believe in them? What happens when I need the miraculous to happen in my life, but I don't believe they happen? In fact, if you've ever asked that question, you're going to see someone asking that question in the story. And it's a story called Jesus Heals the Government Official's Son. And in this story, we are going to meet an individual and we're going to meet a family who are desperate for a miracle, but they don't believe. They can't believe. And if you've ever found yourself there, this might be a story for you today. And in this moment, Jesus, he is gone. He did the wedding in Cana. He did the water to wine, the first miracle. He goes to Jerusalem to celebrate Passover. Now he's headed back up north to Cana. And this is how the story starts. Follow along with me in John chapter 4, verse 46. It says this. So as he traveled through Galilee, he came to Cana where he had turned water into wine, the miracle that we looked at last weekend, the very first one. And there was a government official in nearby Capernaum whose son was very sick. Now, there are two things about the start of this story you need to know. There's really important details for our time together today. The first is this government official lives in Capernaum, which is about 16 miles to Cana, where Jesus is currently at. It's about an 8-hour walk. There's a bit of a distance between the government official and Jesus. The other thing is, and this is a little bit headier, but it's going to be important for our time, is that government official literally means he was a king's man, which suggests that he was a Jewish aristocrat, which means he had wealth, he had power, he had privilege, he had all of those things. And because he was a Jewish aristocrat, it also means he was a Sadducee. Now, at this point in time, there are two important religious groups that exist. There are the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Now, the Pharisees we hear quite a lot about. I mean, they're very religious. They kept the law. They believed God was involved in the details of life. They even believed there'd be life after death. But the Sadducees, they're different. In fact, they are more of a matter-of-fact kind of people, kind of believers. I mean, they weren't sure that there was going to be an afterlife. It wasn't on their radar. They thought we were here just to give God pleasure and be pleasing to him. But the most important thing about the Sadducees you need to know is that they were determined. They lived by this determined mindset, meaning everything would be determined in their life. When they would get a job, when they would get married, when they would have kids, their future, their wealth, their health. It was all determined. If it was going to happen, it was just going to happen. They lived by fate and not by faith. And so you have to understand this government official, he lives in this bucket. Like if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. That's just how it's going to go. It's already been determined. All the facts of life, my future, it's just here. And I'm not going to believe it's going to be any different. But on this day, and on this moment, this man's beliefs get brushed aside. Because today, he's not just a Sadducee, a high-ranking Sadducee, this king's man whose belief system is all around fate. Today, he's a desperate father. Isn't it interesting that all of our pride, all of our beliefs, all what we value get pushed aside when someone we love is suffering? Because this man right now, he's at a point of tension. His entire belief system was built on faith, everything. And if it was going to happen, it was going to happen. Yet he's scared to death that his son is going to die, which is the last thing he wants to see happen. But from his worldview, from his perspective, he doesn't think he can do anything to change that outcome. There's a barrier to belief because if it was going to happen, it's going to happen. But he can't alter what's going to happen in his son's life. It's just going to go. It's just going to play out. That was his fate. And here, he doesn't think anything is going to be different. And maybe you've been there yourself. That you're in a moment or you're in a season that you're finding yourself doubting what Jesus could do in your life. For some, I don't know what that is or why that is for you, but you're in a moment of unbelief. That you don't think Jesus can do the miraculous. And if that's you, for whatever reason, you're in a season of unbelief, I want you to see and watch what this unbelieving government official, desperate dad does next. This is what happens in verse 47. He said, when he heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went and begged Jesus to come to Capernaum to heal his son who was about to die. Now, here's how I think this may have played out. When the official's family got word that Jesus was coming, the official's wife looked at him, and they only heard stories about him. They didn't know him. But the official's wife looked at him and said, you pack your bags, you go get that man, and you bring him here. You go get that man. Our son is sick. You pack your stuff. I don't care what you got to do. Clear your schedule. You go get that man, and you bring him here. And I can imagine the official, the husband, was about to argue back, right? Like he had reasons like he shouldn't go. Like I didn't want to leave you alone with our son. And he's about to give his rebuttal when his wife looks at him with a little fiercer look and a little firmer tone in her voice. And she says, do I need to repeat myself? You pack your bags, you go get that man, and you bring him here. But just imagine for a moment what's running through his mind. Because he's never seen this guy named Jesus, and he's about to leave his dying son based on rumors and stories. And mind you, he doesn't believe in miracles to begin with, but what he does, he packs his bags, says goodbye to his dying son, which could be the last goodbye. He gets his servants, and they leave on this journey. They go step by step by step for 16 miles. And now he is face to face with Jesus, begging for him to come heal his son. And the Greek word there, the verb tense in this passage, begging means that he was begging over and over and over, that he was pleading, saying, Jesus, please, 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 would you come heal my son? I mean, forget being a king's man. Forget the dignity and the worldview. None of that mattered at this moment. All that he needs is Jesus to come to his son's bedside. I mean, he's desperate. They're so desperate. And why are they desperate? Because they've tried everything else. They've exhausted all the exotic medicines. I mean, they've hired the most and best physicians that money could buy. I mean, they've taken all the advice prescribed by professionals. They've even taken suggestions from their servants. But none of it's worked. And his son's about to die. So now he is begging with the man who is his last shot. who's his son's last shot. And I know some of us, you understand that you've been in a season of life or situation or had a sickness, and after trying every other solution, you're at your wit's end, and now you're asking someone to do something about it because you need help, and you need it now. Now, what Jesus says next actually is fascinating to me, and it kind of punches me in the gut. And after hearing the Father's plea to come heal his son, Jesus turns to the crowd at this point, and at this point in his ministry, he's always teaching in front of crowds. There's always crowds gathering around him, and he says something that what was true that maybe you need to hear, maybe I need to hear as well today. And this is what he said. He says this. Jesus asked, "Will you never believe in me unless you see miraculous signs and wonders? Will you never believe in me unless you see miraculous signs and wonders?" Which actually, it's true. And Jesus understood that. He knew that these people, they weren't going to believe and accept and follow him if they didn't see something to believe in him. He understood this. He understood that he couldn't say to them, "Hey, just believe, brother. Just believe, sister. It's going to work out." He knew that. But he also knew he had to show them something that these people would even consider believing and following him. In fact, he knew this to be true, and this is a statement I think for all of us today, is that he knew that if you want others to believe in you, then give them something to believe in. And oh, does Jesus do just that. So he decides to do something so spectacular that we've been talking about it for 2,000 years. Now the Father, hearing Jesus, he looks at the crowd and he looks at his servants, and he's starting to get anxious because the clock is ticking. Moment by moment that he waits, he knows that it's not likely that his son will survive. And so he just says to himself, "Okay, whatever. I'm confused and I need this man to make a decision." So he goes a little closer to Jesus. He grabs his robe, and I even think he falls to his knees. And he says this, the text says, "At the official pleaded, Lord, please come now before my little boy dies. Please, Jesus, would you come now before my boy dies?" And you can hear his voice crack, and the tears start to stream down his face. I mean, forget the fact that he's embarrassed himself in front of his servants and this crowd, and it doesn't matter where he ranks compared to Jesus in society. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. All that matters right now is that his belief, his trust, all of it is based on rumors and stories. He's trusting Jesus based on the testimony of others. He's trusting his son's life based on the stories of our Savior. And in the guy's mind, the official's mind, there's only really two options here of what Jesus is going to do. One is this, that Jesus comes with me and perhaps my son is healed. If all the rumors are true, if all the stories are true, then perhaps Jesus comes with me and my son is healed. Or Jesus refuses to come and my son will die. I mean, these are the only two thoughts he's having right now. He can't even fathom another option, but then Jesus smiles because he's got a third option. And Jesus is going to ask the Father to do what he's been asking people to do ever since. He's going to ask them to take a step of faith, trusting him based on the rumors and the stories and testimonies of other people. And this is what happens. Then Jesus looks at the Father and he says this to him, that Jesus told him, "Go back home, your son will live." He looks at him and says, "Hey, go home. Don't worry. Your son, he's going to live." Now, the Father hesitates here, and he's probably a bit stunned. And he's thinking, what? Like, I can't imagine this. If you're a dad, I'm going to, really? He's thinking, you want me to go home without you? If I go home without you, there's going to be 2 deaths in my family. There's no way. I can't do that. And he's sitting there and he's thinking and he has this little moment because he doesn't expect Jesus to do that. Because all the stories, all the miracles, all the rumors he heard was that Jesus was performing miraculous signs and wonders. So step by step, he went 16 miles to go get the sign and wonder for his son. But what Jesus is doing in this moment is asking the Father to do something more. And it's to trust him, to believe in him. And guess what? This is where we all live. I mean, this is our story. This is our story. This is our story. In fact, in this story, I want to say to you is that this story is a lifetime downsized to a day. This is how we live. We are supposed to place our trust in Jesus, our belief in Jesus, based on those who knew him and saw him. I mean, we're supposed to trust our faith, our family, our future, our health, our kids, everything, based on those who knew him and saw him. So the question I want to ask us today is this: can we believe in Jesus based on what others have seen and heard? Can we? Can we believe in Jesus based on what others have seen and heard? Well, the Father did. The Father, he stands up, brushes his knees off, and he takes a step. And watch what happens. Then Jesus told him, "Go back home, your son will live." And the man believed what Jesus said and started home. This man believes, he turns his tear-streaked face and heads home. He makes a decision that's changed the trajectory of lives for 2,000 years. He decides to live out and believe that what Jesus said is actually true before he has any evidence yet. There is no evidence that what Jesus said was going to be true, but he believes in him. And he takes a step of faith. The guy literally walks away from the only person who could heal his son. His last shot, he walks away from. But you know what he does? He walks home by faith and not by sight. And watch the next part of the story. While the man was on his way, some of his servants met him with the news that his son was alive and well. The father gets the news that the miracles happen. He gets the news that he's going to hold his boy again. He's going to hold his son. And he's amazed at this moment, but he wants a few more details to the story. And he asks them when the boy had begun to get better. And they replied, "Yesterday afternoon at 1:00, his fever suddenly disappeared." And at that moment, the father loses his breath. Tears well up in his eyes. He gets a chill down his spine, and the hair on his arms stand straight up. Because then the father realized that was the very time Jesus had told him, "Your son will live." It happened. And so now the father, he stops walking home, and he starts running home. I mean, he's got to get home. He's got to see his boy. And as he's going home, all of a sudden, his wife meets him at the front, and she's just saying, "There's been a miracle. There's been a miracle. I can't explain it. I could never fathom it, but something's happened." And then the father, her husband, grabs her hands and says, I know there's been a miracle." And watch how this unfolds. Then he and his entire household believed in Jesus. And this was the second miraculous sign Jesus did in Galilee after coming from Judea. And I just want to say, his whole household, they believed in Jesus. Of course they believed. Because for them, seeing was believing even when there wasn't evidence yet. Even before there was proof. I mean, they decided to trust Jesus in advance based on the rumors and the stories and testimonies of those who saw them. And what I see in this passage here, I just want to say to you, Walking by faith isn't just wishful thinking. For us, it's living every day of our lives as if Jesus is who he said he was. That what he did is actually true. It's us believing in advance. It's us believing before the prayers are answered. It's us believing before the miracle happens. You see, I think what John's trying to tell us here, and what the Father shows us through his actions, and I think what Jesus has been trying to tell us for the last 2,000 years when it comes to believing, it's this. Your belief cannot be bartered, bought, or borrowed. It just can't. It's too personal, and it doesn't happen overnight. You can't snatch it. No, it doesn't work that way. Instead, you have to know your belief, it has to be built from the bottom up, step by step. The journey of faith and believing begins with a single step. And for us, some of us, it takes us taking the step saying, you know what? I'm not going to be naive about this thing. I'm actually going to look at the evidence that what God shows us in his word. And I'm going to choose to trust the evidence that we see in God's word, even though we have a hard time believing it. Even though we can't fathom it, we're going to take a step to actually believe it and trust it. And for us, it's going to Jesus sometimes on a 16-mile walk to get something that we didn't believe in, but we're desperate for. For you, it might be a step of faith saying, you know what? I'm going to step through my suspicion. I'm going to step through my skepticism. And when it comes to my life, when I feel weak, I'm going to take a step. That when I feel heartbroken, I'm going to take another step. When I feel overwhelmed, one more step. When I need healing, another step. And when you need a miracle, you take a step. You see, building our belief doesn't happen overnight, and sometimes it does take us a 16-mile journey. In the moment of confusion and crisis, to build our faith from the bottom up, step by step. So question is, what do you do when you need a miracle and you don't believe in them? Well, you do what the government official did, and you walk step by step by step.
My name's Joelle, and I am the executive pastor of discipleship here at Crossroads. So on March 6th, I was a healthy mom and wife and pastor. On March 7th, I got sick. That began a very long health struggle for me. When I got sick that day, March 7th, I had what my daughter had. I thought it was just going to be a really bad cold and that I would get better when she got better. She did get better and I didn't. The headache that I got was relentless and never left me. Night and day, I had it. It caused extreme fatigue, tons of muscle soreness, and just overall misery. And it was causing me not to be able to do anything that I love to do. I was just basically at work and then I was in bed all the time. After months of going to doctors and specialists, they gave me a diagnosis. New daily persistent headache, NDPH. It's an autoimmune disorder, but it's just basically a headache that causes a whole bunch of other problems that is completely untreatable. It's progressive, and basically people who get this autoimmune disorder don't recover. So after receiving the diagnosis, I have to say I felt basically no hope. I didn't give up altogether, but I certainly wasn't trying very hard to get well. I remember one day in mid-July when I was laying in bed and my husband came in. He just said to me, "I'm gonna need you to fight." And I was like, looked at him like, "What are you talking about?" And he just said, "I know that we've been given a diagnosis that you're not gonna get better, but we have a whole life ahead of us. And if there's any chance that you could get well, we need to go after that. And I'm gonna need you to fight." I agreed to take whatever steps forward we needed to take to see if God would heal me. So during this season of just taking steps forward, I was talking a lot to God about healing. And sometimes I would even say, like, right now, Lord, right now, would you heal me? And then when the headache didn't go away, I just committed to keep my faith and to push towards God. I just got on my knees before God and I would say, God, I am not gonna make it through today without you. It was kind of a pitiful prayer, to be honest, but it was kind of all I had in me. He was the one fueling me to take those next steps towards healing. So as we were trying to figure out new ways for me to start feeling better, we'd heard about a doctor in New Mexico. But at this point, I had gone about 7 or 8 months with this headache, and we were willing to do just about anything for me to be healed. So we flew to New Mexico and saw this incredible doctor. She began to develop a protocol for my life. And what was cool about this was that it was just more hope. And we felt like God was using this doctor to bring more hope for healing. So it was 1 year and 17 days into having that headache when I had my first morning that I woke up and didn't have any pain. I just spent that day smiling from ear to ear, knowing that God had brought me to a place of healing. Maybe not complete healing yet, but it was a big step forward for me. And I still had the headache from time to time, but I could tell that God was slowly healing me. And now today, a couple of years later, I don't experience headaches almost ever. It's amazing because I know what it was like in those dark days when I didn't have very much hope at all. And now I get to live an amazing life as a mom and wife and pastor. And I'm so grateful to God for the way that He has healed me. And what I learned was that in the midst of those really dark days when we were battling this illness, that all I could really do was cling to hope and cling to Jesus and take steps towards Him. And it's because of Him that I am healed.